Some of the details that we're going to be talking about were already mentioned in previous shiurim, but now we're going to be, this is why we're learning Shin and Ches now, not ala seder of the way we learned, of the way the סימן and Shulchan Aruch, because it's a continuation to what we learned before the Yom Tovim. I'm going to be mentioning, I'm not speaking about one specific topic, but more a couple of interesting points that are relevant to סימן Shin and Ches, which are, some of them are Negei L'Maisa. The Alter Rebbe mentions a bunch of places that are considered, the סימן Shin and Ches is discussing places which are hukaf lediרה, not hukaf lediרה, places, not houses, but areas which have been enclosed with a mechitza, a kosher mechitza of 10 tefachim, which would be considered a reshus hayachid midiraisa, but Chachamim were mesaken that they should be considered a karmelis, that you should not be able to be metaltal in it more than daladamas. And there's a bunch of examples, and there's what the סימן mainly talks about is a hekef which was originally made not lediרה, and if you want to change it afterwards to be mukaf lediרה, how to do it. A hekef which was originally done lediרה and afterwards it loses its status, and in the size of those, when does that size become a problem? If it's a hekef shaloi hukaf lediרה, when does it become a problem? So it begins, what are these hekefim? Hekef mechitza shaloi hukaf lediרה. What's the definition of hukaf lediרה? You're going to see it in a few places, not only in Sif Aleph, but it's also in further in the סימן and other places. Shaloi hukaf lediras adam l'knisa v'yitzia tamid, something which is not usually used, a hekef which is not usually used for a standard entering and exiting the place. And examples Alter Rebbe brings are the Rechava Shachere Batim, a big backyard, a karfef, which we mentioned, which is the place where they keep the big field where they keep all the wood, a gino, which is a garden with not with trees, and a pardes, which is a place with trees. And all these, if they are mukaf lediרה, if they're mukaf not lediרה, and their size is more than beis hasayim, then you can't be metaltal in it. And even if it's less than that, at certain times you could be metaltal, you can't be metaltal. But each one of these ones, these ones are the ones that are considered loy, that are, even though they have a hekef, they're not considered a reshus hayachid midrabanan, and you cannot carry in them. Some of them are considered some of them could be mukaf afterwards lediרה, some of them cannot. Now when you look in Shulchan Aruch, regular Shulchan Aruch, it gives you another, there's two differences. We'll get to one, we'll start with one. There's one of the things that's mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch is the burganin. The burganin are the huts that are made for the guards that would watch the fields. So if you have a field which has a burganim, and the purpose, and so then you would think that it's hukaf lediרה. The answer is no, it's not considered hukaf lediraa. Alter Rebbe does not mention it bichlal in סימן Shin and Ches in the list of the places. He does mention it later. Now, when you look I mentioned to learn the ha'aris of the Maharil on the סימן, which is in your book in page 10, 11 and on. So that is the Maharil wrote ha'aris on the Shulchan Aruch the Mechaber, not on the Alter Rebbe. L'chayre was written before the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch was formalized in its current form, and therefore was written in that form. And over there he discusses this, what the Shulchan Aruch says, that hekef shel hukaf lediraa, like ginas and pardesim, and burganim, these burganim, what's the Shulchan Aruch says, that the whole purpose of this burganim is just to watch, to supervise whatever is inside. What does inside mean? Obviously it means not inside the little hut. You're not there to watch what's inside the hut. You're there to watch what is outside the hut. Yeah, that means you're sitting in the hut and you're watching what's in this enclosed area which is around the hut. So that's the first thing the Maharil tells you, by the way. You should just know that the purpose of here, B'seichan, doesn't mean inside the hut. It's common sense. It means the field. It means the field around it. When is it a problem? Why is the Shulchan Aruch mentions it as a problem? Is because these places are only used during daytime. The way it works is that these people, when they would want to, if it was hot, they would go into the huts and for a shade. But they don't live there. They don't live there on a regular basis. They're not there at night. Or the way he explains it is that they go at night. They go back home, and therefore, since at night they go back home, so obviously within the little burgan and within the little hut you could carry, but outside the hut in this big field which is attached to it, that hut does not make the field into a hukaf ladidah, and therefore you cannot be metaltal in it, despite the fact that there is this human presence, human house on the field. Now, and if the person does stay there at night also, so then it switches from a diras arai to a diras kva. It becomes a permanent place. That's the definition of a permanent place, is when they stay there also at night, and therefore that becomes a mukaf ladidah. But now, what happens if you have a field which after the burganin was already made? That's when you opened the field towards the burganin, or you made the burganin around it, and therefore it was able to do it. So he says these, and you made it inside. You made the hekef around it. Even if you live there at night, there's a shit of a Tosfos and the Rosh that it's not considered hukaf ladidah even in such a scenario, and Rashi holds that it is hukaf ladidah. Machlekes Rashi Tosfos, if it's considered hukaf ladidah, if it's not considered hukaf ladidah. According to Rashi, the fact that they live there day and night makes it fully hukaf ladidah. According to Tosfos and the Rosh, it does not convert it into fully hukaf ladidah. The difference would be whether you're allowed to carry in the whole area, even if it's more than the base or not. Shita of Rashi is that you are allowed to. The Magen Avraham paskins like Rashi. Is that working? So the Magen Avraham does paskin like Rashi, that if even though this little hut is not considered a full residence by living day and night, it's a dira grua. Still, no, it's enough to make it a hukaf ladidah for the purpose of being able to carry in the whole field that where this hut is in, even if it's more than beis hasayim. But the Maharil ends with 4 words, v'tov lahachmir. V'tov lahachmir, and he's medayik that from further on in the Shulchan Aruch. Now, when you look in, that's one point you should remember, because we're going to get back to it in a minute from the Alter Rebbe. Just another point that I mentioned in the past, that it's also going to be relevant for later. I mentioned it in the previous year, that the karfif, which the Alter Rebbe brings the lashon, it's hekef gadol hachnas ba'etzim la'otzar. Rashi, which is where it's copied from, has the words mechutz la'ir over there. The Alter Rebbe doesn't mention the words mechutz la'ir. The Alter Rebbe just says hekef gadol. Why is this negaya? Because there are some opinions we're going to get to later which hold that karfifos within the city limits are do not exactly make the hekef puzzle. But since from the Alter Rebbe that it does make the hekef puzzle, since from the Rebbe's letters also that it makes the hekef puzzle, as we're going to get to it later. Now, all these examples that we mentioned, the Gina and the Pardes and the Karfif and all these things that were not hukaf l'dira sodom, if they you're not allowed to carry within them. However, if they were hukaf l'dira sodom, which is what it says in Sif Hey in this in Siman Shin and Ches and Alter Rebbe, and what is hukaf l'dira? Again, the definition is the hainu l'knisa v'litzio tamid, that it's standard, always people go in and out of it. So even if it's much bigger than the base of Saim, you're still allowed to carry within it, to it, and from it, regardless of what it is. The same thing with if you already have a karfif and then afterwards you decide that it doesn't have any hekef, and then afterwards you make a hekef lediרה around it, then it becomes mutter to be able to carry in it. What is the example of hukaf lediרה that the Alter Rebbe brings in Seif Vav? Example Alter Rebbe brings in Seif Vav is specifically these burgonim that you make a sukkah shemrim, this little hut where they sleep there by yom u'balayla, night and day. Or you build a base dira, even though you don't live there permanently. You still that, and then you make a hekef mechitzis, or you open a door from it to the field. That is considered mukaf l'dira, and therefore you are allowed to be metaltal in it in any way, shape, or form. And the Alter Rebbe does not bring a second opinion. Does not bichlal bring Rashi's opinion on this matter, and does not also, the Maharil seems to say that even though the Mogen Avram passes, this is a quote from the Mogen Avram, if you look in the footnotes, the footnote Unches, which is on this definition, and Unches, footnote Samach is all, you see all the footnotes, and it says Mogen Avram, and Rashi, etc. So you see that the Alter Rebbe does paskin like Rashi and Mogen Avram, not like Tosfos. I mentioned to you from the Maharil, so I brought you the Maharil before. The Maharil does say that Tev L'Hachmir in such a scenario, but the Alter Rebbe evidently didn't even bring it. Sometimes the Alter Rebbe thinks that the Shitta is valid. The Alter Rebbe mentions it, then says Ha'ikar like the other Svara. Over here, the Alter Rebbe Bichlal doesn't mention even the Shitta of Tosfos and the Rosh regarding this matter of that these huts which people are there and they sleep and they sleep there, but it's not really a real permanent house like anything else, is a dira grua. Maybe you should not be able it should not be enough to be able to make it fully hukaf l'dira for the purpose of these karfifos. So now, what happens? How do you do? Now, if you did the hekef and then afterwards, if the hekef was done first and it was not for the purpose of a dira, and then you built a house inside this hekef, it does not save the whole area from becoming it does not make it into hukaf l'dira if the gates was around it first. Why is this important? Just before we continue Shulchan Aruch, you're dealing with, if you're going to be making an Eruv in a campsite or in a big place, and the hekef was made first, and then afterwards they built inside it, they never dealt with the original hekef, and you have a big empty karfif over there, you have a problem. You have to fix the hekef to be able to make it kosher for Shabbos. Otherwise, it doesn't help you. So how do you fix it? Alter Rebbe says you have to make a pirza of 10 amas, because that is considered the definition of a pirza is 10 amas. Then you knock down the whole 10 amas and you rebuild the gate within those 10 amas and you're good to go. Then that's considered enough of a hekef. Or you knock it out and you put a tzuras HaPesach over there. You don't have to rebuild the gate. You could just make a pirza of 10, put a tzuras HaPesach over there, and that also makes it into a hukaf l'dira to convert the existing hekef which used to be there and become a new hekef. Now what happens if you have a big wall and you can't do anything about it? It's a big rock wall, you're going to start breaking it, you're going to have a problem. Or you're using a hekef, because a lot of times these hekefim, let's say you're using a hekef, it's in a city, and you can't exactly destroy the existing walls that are around it. But it wasn't hukaf l'dirah. So then Alter Rebbe brings a machlekes and ziftes. Well, it's not a machlekes. You put earth on one side, you put earth on the other side, it becomes small. Then it becomes that you could walk over it, so it eliminates the existing wall that used to be in that section. And it's good in the machlekes is whether it's enough to do it 1 week, or you have to have in mind mevatle that it stays there forever. And that's the only way that it becomes a pirze that you could then that could make it enough to be considered a hekef. And the Alter Rebbe says that should be machmer, like the shitta, that it has to be permanent. That is right. So now, if you have
has to be permanent means that when you put it there, it will last for this.
Yeah. When you put it permanent, if somebody else moves it, no, it has to be that you have in mind. You have in mind to do it. 1 second. Yes. It could be makel over there, huh? Father opinions could be makel. Now, if you have so now you have this karfif, and you want to eliminate this karfif from being a karfif, and this karfif is filled with trees. Now we're going to see the difference between trees and other things soon, but you have a karfif which is filled with trees, and now you want to, and it's more than beis hasayim, and you want to make the area that's beis hasayim, more than beis hasayim, smaller. So that way you have, because if you have more than beis hasayim, you're not allowed to carry. Now you're going to take the karfif, make it smaller than beis hasayim, and now you have, it's no longer a karfif shaloi hukaf l'dirah, beis hasayim. It's also beis hasayim, so it's not a problem. So what are you going to do? You're going to plant trees over there. So planting trees is not enough to cancel. If you plant trees and now the area that doesn't have trees anymore, that area is still empty, is less than beis hasayim, it's not enough to make it ois hukaf lediרה. Why? Because we look at what the purpose of the karfif is. What's the purpose of the karfif? To have the trees there. These empty areas, the purpose is to have trees there. If the purpose is to have trees there, you plant the trees. You didn't cancel the original purpose of what the karfif was made for, of what this area was made for. If you didn't cancel the purpose, it still remains in its original state. These trees that were put there did not take away from the status of this area, and therefore it remains yoser and beis hasayim even with the trees. As opposed to if you're going to put a big house over there, and it makes the rest of the area less than beis hasayim, then you don't have to worry about it, because that does cancel the existing. It's no longer the original status that it was beforehand. And that's in Sifyud Beis. And anything else which is done inside this karfif, if it's something which is for the purpose of the karfif, then it's still not memat. For example, if you're going to make a water irrigation system, a pit of water in the middle, but that's for the purpose of watering the karfif, and it's also not mevatel. However, it's something which is completely not needed for it, then it is mevatel. So now we're dealing with trees that are in a place, and these trees, you planted them for the purpose of making it smaller, and we say it doesn't help for the purpose of making it smaller. But this is talking about a karfif shaloi hukaf l'dirah, and now you want to convert it to a smaller share so you're carrying it. What happens when you have a karfif that was mukaf l'dirah? Is there a way to take it, because up until now we were discussing karfif shaloi hukaf l'dirah, to convert it into something where you could carry in it by shrinking it? Yeah, I'm going to mention this one more detail on that, we're going to get to it soon. But what happens if you have a karfif which was hukaf l'dirah? So it is, you are allowed to carry there. And now you come and you plant trees all around it. And do these trees cancel the status of the karfif? That in Sif Yud Zayin, it tells you that the trees do not cancel. Planting trees doesn't make a difference. Why? Because people usually do walk around. People enjoy walking between trees. That's what the purpose of all the parks are in the cities, is for the people to be walking between the trees. To get shade, whatever it is, they enjoy it. People plant trees is to enjoy the trees. So therefore, if you have a karfif that was mukaf l'dira, the fact that you planted trees over there, and right now it's not what it was originally, so hukaf l'dira, maybe you had in mind for your own enjoyment, now the trees are enjoying it, that's still considered your usage, and therefore it is not mevatel the hekef. What happens if you plant zroim? It means if you plant plants and put rows of corn or wheat or tomatoes or anything else, or flowers, nobody goes to take shade with flowers and nobody walks around on the flowers. The purpose of it is to be able to see them, the flowers. Yeah, we're going to see this. The machlekes about flowers we're going to get to later, but before we get to flowers, it's simple. A cornfield is not made for tourism unless it's specifically planned for tourism. That's a special cornfields that they make for corn mazes, but overall, fields are not made for hanging out in the afternoon. You walk around in the wheat field and marvel at the wheat stalks that are growing over there. So by you putting wheat fields over there, what you did was you were mevatel the dira that it was before. Before it was made ladira. Ladira is for human beings to enjoy it. We'll get to it soon. Not sure. We'll get to it. There's enough time. So let's focus on what's clearly zroim. Clearly zroim is vegetables, grains, these kinds of things. That's mevatel the dira. The moment it's mevatel the dira, the fact that it was hukaf l'dira originally, the fact that you now planted over there these things, you eliminated the status of hukaf l'dira that it used to have. But that depends on the size and how much it is. So if you have a very big karfif, and you planted only a vegetable patch in a certain area, which is something which is common, people have big properties and decide to have a vegetable patch in the middle, that's nizra miyutay. That's not enough to cancel the whole status of the area. However, in the first of nizra rubai, it's mevatelet, regardless. Even if it's less than base osayim, let's say you have an area which is 2.5 saw area, and you planted 1.5. So the fact is that the area with grains is a roiv of your property, but it's not base osayim. Still, being that it became the roiv that considers that the rest, the other saw that's left, the other area which is the miut, now that area becomes bottle to the roiv. The whole thing, the whole karfif become ois mukaf ladira, and you're not let it carry. You're not let it carry over there. However, if it's only miutay, that's when it depends on the size. If the area is exactly base, if it's exactly base saw to the dot, then you're still allowed to carry in it, but to carry from the house to the karfif, or from the karfif to the house is that's what is a machlekes, whether you are allowed to carry, you're not allowed to carry. Two shittas that the Alter Rebbe brings in Sif Yud Zayin, and the Alter Rebbe says tev lahachmir, yesh lahachmir, not toiv, yesh lahachmir. You have to be machmir kesvar rishayna, that if it's in exactly base osayim, you should not be carrying from it to it. Why? What's the logic behind it? Because you already know from before, you have a place which is asur, and the place which is mutar is partus b'milui, is completely open to the place which is asur. The place which is completely open gets dragged to the status of the place to which it's open to. We saw it when it was the roof. We saw it with all with the streets. Certain scenarios when something is completely open, doesn't have a enclosure in front of it, that takes the status of the place that it's part of society. So you have over here, Nizra Ruba, it's based, the majority of the field was planted, majority of this karfif was planted, and the area is exactly Beis Osayim. Now the rest of the area which you want to use for yourself is part of B'milua, is completely open towards this now wheat field. Therefore, you're not allowed to carry. That's the first shitta. The second shitta is mekel in exactly so base osayim. And alternatively, should be machmir like the svara rishon. However, if the area, the miut, it was still the miut of the area was planted, and that miut is less than base osayim, then you are allowed to carry over there. The first shit that Alter Rebbe brings is you are allowed to carry there. Alter Rebbe then brings the shit that says you're not allowed to carry there for the same logic as before, which is less than base osayim. And Alter Rebbe says you don't have to be machmir like linyan halacha b'divrei soifrim halach achar hamekel. Seems like the Alter Rebbe implies in that scenario when it's less than base osayim, that's also in Sif Zayin. If it's miut and it's less than base osayim, you could be mekel and carry in the whole area. However, if it's totally more than base osayim, there's no argument. If the miut is more than base osayim, you have a massive field, but the miut which is planted afterwards is more than base osayim, then it is mevatel completely the hekef. Why is that? Because over here, like we said before, it's part of the milua. It's completely the other area, the bigger area is completely open to this basis, more than base osayim, which is planted, and it makes it completely awesome. Now, what happens if you have a kafaf which is exactly base osayim, and then the whole thing is planted? It becomes a shayla, it's listapik. Alter Rebbe leaves it as a question mark, yeah, in the middle of Sif Yud. Alter Rebbe continues. Therefore, somebody who does have a backyard, and over there he has planted vegetables or whatever it is that he has over there. And this is like the maskana of the Alter Rebbe in this matter. That's the end of Sif Yud Zayin. The Mish says whoever has a gina zura b'chatzere ve'ein b'nei mechitza kilchasa, and there's no proper gate around the karfef section. So if the zurua is reva chatzer, you're not allowed to carry from the planted area to the house and from the house to it. Why? Maybe the planted area is mevatel the dira. Same thing, and that is even if it's and that's even if it's less than base osayim, because it's a roiv. And if it's more than the base, if the whole chatzar with the zarua is more than base osayim, you still can't carry in the whole chatzar, right? Because it's considered like a regular karfef. But if it's less, if the area which is planted is less than the majority of the chatzar, so if the area itself which is planted is base osayim, then the whole chatzar becomes asur. If it has exactly base osayim, is yesh lahachmer, like it was mentioned. If it's less than base osayim, yesh lahakol. Right, so that is all when it's opened without a gate towards it. Now, what happens if you have a proper mechitza in front of it? That means you have a karfef, you recognize that you have a problem, and you put a mechitza in front of the karfef, then that mechitza saves it, and you are allowed to carry in the whole area. The only difference would be whether you're allowed to carry from it and to it. But the area beyond the gate, which is the area closer to your house, which you are using and you blocked off the karfef, that area you are allowed to carry it in. Now, one of the examples that Alter Rebbe brings towards the end of the sif is if you have a karfef which is 3 base gimel sein, and then you put a roof on one se'ah, and in that scenario we say pitikra yerid, and this is what I mentioned. I also mentioned in the previous shir that the way that Tzemach Tzedek explains what pitikra is, and that is in the Tzemach Tzedek, where the Tzemach Tzedek writes a Shulchan Aruch based on the Rambam, and that is in page 99 in your book. That over there he says about the roof that covers it, that even if the roof is slanted, it's still considered like the roof is going down. because right now all you left is exactly Beis Sa'ah, so you're able to save it. Yeah, that is, in short, a half-hour summary of Siman Shin and Ches. How does this apply practically? Yeah, so in the houses, you understand how it applies. How does it apply to a city? A lot of times when the people make city Eirovin, they rely on mechitzas that were already built. And you have, for example, when the first time they tried making the Manhattan Eirov, which is what the Rebbe's letters are about, what did they rely on? They calculated the walls, the sea walls that are on the sides of Manhattan, the water goes up against it, that those are considered walls, and it happens to be that Manhattan, the way we know Manhattan today, is not the original island. It's bigger. They did expand it with landfill, and they built a wall so you could, and it was made specifically ledidah. So there was a whole discussion. They wanted to rely on it. That's an example. And then one of the things that the Rebbe mentions in the letters regarding Manhattan, punkt regarding this issue, is if you look in the Rebbe's letter in page 139, he says, the Rebbe tells him, this Rabbi Moshkovitz, one made the Eirov, lepelish lehiskir b'chol hashaka v'tari shebekuntas v'shalach ela desainin dezroim animtzoim be'ir shadas kam rishonim v'achrenim mevatlam mechitzas. He says, you're talking about Manhattan, you want to use the seawalls and consider it the Eirov. You didn't mention to me that you have zroim in Manhattan. There are zroim over there, are places, not talking about trees, talking about areas which are planted. And those are mevatel, even if the mechitzas are proper, they are mevatel the mechitzas. According to certain Rishonim.
Sections of Zoyim come together, or does it have to be society of Zoyim together, or?
What does together mean?
Does it have to be connected?
Not fully, no.
If
it's one closed area and you have a one saw of cornfield here and one saw of cornfield here and an empty saw in the middle, the whole thing is three saws, bottle, sure. The middle one's bottle, yeah?
Where?
Where?
Where is there in Manhattan? Central Park. There's a wall.
Now there is. Anyway, so this is what the Rav answered the Rebbe. It says, Mashikosav in Azraim Shaloi Rob Manhattan, Lepela Adover, Kimurubim Hem Bekal Mekayim Sham. Okay, now, which just brings me to another point. This is what I want to bring. It seems to me, from here, let me do the Shadadei first, then you understand what I understand from this Rebbe's letter. If you look in the Shadadei was also the Lubavitcher Rav, very chashuv Lubavitcher Rav, many, many years ago, past in the time of Tzemach Tzedek, I think. And in Siman Lamed Hey, a short tshuva that he has over there, is discussing about, then we'll go back to the Rebbe's letter. He discusses about an Eirov that was made in a city, and then came the Paretz in town, Adoin Ha'ir, and decided around the area of the walls, he decided that he wants to make it nice, and he ordered to plant flowers, make a park, plant flowers next to it. And there was and the question that this Rav asked was whether these flowers and grass is considered like zroim, which now becomes the base of sayim of flowers and zroim, flowers and grass cancels. You have to make a wall around it to be able to make an Eirov, and right now they built an Eirov, and then comes the owner of the town and makes a park in the middle. Do you have to build a wall around the park or not? If it's taka base of sayim and it's mevato, the mechitzas around it, now the whole area around the park is paratz v'milui to the park. You're not allowed to carry anywhere. You have to make a wall around it. So that's the question that he asked. And the issue was, he says, kosher lahamid is very hard to, evidently, the reason why this guy wanted to put the flowers was to cover up the walls that they built over there. And now they're going to make another wall around it. It's not going to help anything. It's going to defeat the purpose. It's very hard for them to put Seres HaPesach, whatever it was. So that was a question. If if you put enough of a Suras HaPesachs around it to enclose it away from the city. Suras HaPesachs around the park, not around the whole city. The city was done. Now you want to close off the park.
You're able to close off of the park from the city.
We put every 10 amas.
Flowers were along the wall.
It's not clear from the story what happens. He wanted to make in the park next to the wall. He wanted to make the kikar. Kikar is a main area. He wanted to plant it. He wanted to plant a park. Made a park in the middle of the city. Not touching the wall. He made a park close to next to it. Next to the mechitzas of the Erev, there's a park, empty area. He decided he's making a park out of it, flowers and grass. And they asked the Sha'arei Deya what should do. So he writes two things. He says, since the Shas Atchak could be mekel based on the Chacham Tzvi in his Tshuvas that says that Zroim in a city are not oyser. It's not considered a first reason. He says the Chacham Tzvi says that in a city Zroim are not oyser because it's not similar to a karfuf. The idea of a karfuf is an area outside the city, which is where things are kept. The trees are kept for storage and for them to bring it into the city. Not an area inside the city. It's not the definition of a karfuf. So the fact that they made a nice area of grass and flowers, not for walking, but the nice area of grass and flowers, does not mevatel the mechitzas of the city. That's a Chacham Tzvi. Second of all, the grass and the flowers are not bichlal considered. Second reason, he says bichlal, maybe flowers and grass are not considered zroim. Yeah, those are the two reasons. One of the examples that he brings, one of the rayas that the Sha'arei Deya brings is that when it discusses in Yerushalayim, it says that Ezra was mesaken not to make ginais and pardesim in Yerushalayim. It says over there, it says, except for a rose garden. So he says, because the rose garden used to be there before. So if rose garden used to be there before, it obviously wasn't mevatel the Erev. But he says doesn't like that he doesn't like that raya so much. But he has the 2-3 different svaras, and he is mekel. The two svaras are, first of all, that the city there's no karfuf inside the city, and second of all, that flowers and grass is not considered zroim. Now, when you look back to what we learned before, first of all, if you look at a simple lashon of the Alter Rebbe, I mentioned it to you, karfuf does apply in the city. In general, when it comes to, I'll give you a general understanding, there's two ways, when you learn, especially in Hilchos Ceirovin, there's two ways of learning, two main ways of learning. One way is looking b'medayik at what it says, and says, well, it says karfuf, it has to be whatever it says in Gemara exactly, or you look at the metzias and at the logic behind it. For example, when you look later on in Shulchan Aruch, in סימן Shin Tzadik Ches, when it talks about Erev Tchumen, it mentions over there the Burganim, and it's over there it discusses the people that the Beis HaKvaros, which has a hut where a guy lives to watch the Beis HaKvaros. Right, and that is the question is whether the Beis HaKvaros is still considered part of the hekef of Erev Tchumen or not. So when you look at it, you can be medayik and say, well, this only applies to Beis HaKvaros outside the city. Maybe Beis HaKvaros inside the city doesn't apply. Right? Could you say, maybe make a cheshbon of Beis HaKvaros? No. You think about it, say Beis HaKvaros in those days, there's no Beis HaKvaros inside the city. The Chlal Bati Kvaros were not inside the cities. Every place. Elamai, when the cities grew, they went around the Beis HaKvaros. The Beis HaKvaros ended up in the middle of the city. But the idea of a Beis HaKvaros is always to put them outside the city. Har HaZeisim is outside Yerushalayim, and the cemeteries here in New York are also outside the city. The city then grew, and it surrounded all the cemeteries from around. Same thing with karfuf and with a lot of other details you're going to learn. If you're going to be medayik, consider that Rashi says that karfifos michutz loir. So you're going to say, oh, a karfif inside the city is not, right? Because Rashi says karfifos michutz loir. Right? That's not the idea. Rashi is telling you a history. The history is that the karfif michutz loir had the karfif then was michutz loir. The Alter Rebbe deletes the words michutz loir. Doesn't mention them. Alter Rebbe doesn't make a difference. Karfif michutz loir inside the city. The idea is the size and the purpose. Follow the logic. The size and the purpose. If the size is the big size, and the purpose of it is not a residential purpose, then automatically it falls into a different category that it cannot be. It cannot be a hukaf. It's not considered a rishus yachid. And now, if you're going to do in the same logic, if you're going to now go and be zeireya in a certain place, what you're doing is you're taking away the status of. Until now it was hukaf ledidah, and now we're taking away the status of hukaf ledidah and making it into a new status. A status that's not for human use. So that's clear, pretty clear. The fact that Alter Rebbe doesn't mention the ir, but over here, Alter Rebbe holds that karfif could be inside the city also. So if you have a karfif inside the city, you have a problem. Now, what you asked about whether there's cornfields growing in Manhattan, the answer is no. There's no cornfields growing in Manhattan. I don't know if there was cornfields growing in Manhattan since the 1800s, 1700s. The whole New York was farmland. It wasn't, there was pigs growing, pigs eating, grazing in the neighborhoods, and there was other things growing. But then it became a city. And the city grew, and it took away. So, if you look at the logic, you follow the logic. Why are trees not considered a problem for karfif? Because the purpose of the trees is to make a comfortable place for people to hang out over there. And the purpose of grass is not for people to hang out, not grass, I mean flowers, is intentionally, specifically not for people to be walking on the flowers. Nobody is planting flowers for people to walk on them. You make flower areas and you make paths between them, for people to enjoy looking at it. Yeah, if you make paths. So if you have a big area which is planted, and it's not a park which is made for people to enjoy, it's planted for other things, or whatever reason it is, doesn't have to be specifically corn or grain. In that scenario, that is again mafkia, the gather of hukaf ledidah from it. So when the Eruv was done, when they went to the Eruv of Manhattan, one of the things that I ever pointed out to them is go check and see. There are areas in Manhattan which are planted. They're not areas which were made for, aside from Central Park, it was made for people to walk. But there were areas which are closed off. They were made to remain closed off, and they're not for people to enjoy and to walk around them. Because if you have a place that was hukaf ledidah, and then you plant the trees over there, it's not mevatel the hekef, right? Why? Because still, if you were first hukaf ledidah, remember, we're talking about hukaf ledidah, and then you plant inside of it. If it wasn't hukaf ledidah, it makes no difference. If you made a hekef and you have trees or grass or anything in there, or it's empty, but it was hukaf sheloi ledidah, it doesn't make a difference what's there. We're talking about hukaf ledidah, and then afterwards you planted in the middle a section of trees or a section of grain. That is, the trees are not mevatel the original mechitzis. Why? Because they're there for the people to enjoy it. That's the lashon. No. Whereas it's not for enhancing this. Do people hang out over there or not? The exact lashon is look in Sifyud Zayin and Alter Rebbe. Yeah, karfif is mesasem shukaf ledidah v'nota ruboy ilonos afilu eino masuyos shurois. They're not made in a normal, in a regular, exactly nice lines that you can walk between. Eino mevatlim hadira shederech hu listoifef betzeil ha'ilonis tamid. It's a regular thing to hang out by the shade of the trees. It serves.
The shade from flowers.
How are you going to get the shade from the flowers?
Shade.
Huh?
Nice smell. It's like stay in the view.
Let's say, but shuras is for what?
Why do you need shuras? He says you don't need shuras. The logic why? Because if the trees are not planted normal, it's hard to walk between them.
So it's just to have a nice shade and beautiful.
You stand in the shade, you walk under the trees.
Okay, it's problem to see. They're made them to plant flowers in their gardens.
To look at, not to walk in it. So you plant flowers, and what do you do with the flowers? You sit behind them and you look at them. So that area is no longer for the usage of a person. The area where the flowers are. The flowers are here and I'm here.
Yes, and the question is,
And the trees are here and I'm also here.
the question is, you're not standing with the tree, you're standing
Under the trees.
Yourself, if it's 4 by 10, whatever. If it's big enough, that's also discussed.
Yeah, later. Yeah.
But then the question is whether it's saying they know.
What's the purpose of it? Yeah. So if the purpose of it is for the human enjoyment, then yeah, maybe even flowers also. That's the logic behind it. Maybe flowers also work. Yeah, for the park is made for that.
What other reason is there for flowers? What other reason is there for flowers?
Besides for human enjoyment, yeah.
Weiß nicht.
So we're starting with one.
Okay. So if it's made for the purpose of human enjoyment, after it's not mevatel, the idea is not mevatel the mechitzas. But if it's not made for human enjoyment, it cancels the original status, and you have to put something around it. Practically speaking, you're going to make a Eruv in a city, you're going to make a hekef. Sometimes you have inside the city karfifos that you have to close off. Before, even if you make a big hekef around the whole city, if you have a karfif inside which is big, the hekef is not going to help it. You have to make a hekef around the karfif. Where does this apply? In New York you don't have it too much, but in other places you have big ponds in the middle. A big pond is a karfif, essentially. It's a carmel, hukaf lediרה. Big pond that nobody's going in there. So if you say logic, you look at it, and you look at the fish and you enjoy it, maybe. It's not, you have to put a tzuras Pesach or a gate around the area of where the pond is.
What's if it's deep enough? If it's deep enough, why don't we just say?
Might use the walls, the actual pond.
To consider it all around it?
Yeah.
Maybe you could look at it, yeah. You can't see them.
What is about the wall?
The water is also about the wall, but if you have a gap, if you have enough area between them until the water starts. If you have 10 tefachim until the water starts.
If you're in a park with trees, and there's a wall around, let's say this section, let's say like in the Central Park, there's basically like area there.
If the park is completely enclosed, then it was me.
If you're in a section of the park which is enclosed.
Which has trees and it's enclosed and completely enclosed, and the purpose of it was for human beings to be there inside the trees.
Hang around this.
Hang
around this.
Yeah, then you could carry over there. If it was hukaf lediרה, yeah. It wasn't really hukaf lediרה, there's nobody living in the park. There's all around it, yeah.
It's a park
For people to walk out of the house and go from one side to another side. Yeah, it should be fine. To carry in there, if it's closed off properly.
What if the park closed at night? What if it closes at night? What if the park is closed at night?
Still fine. It's not, that's, Talmud doesn't mean 24 hours.
But the wording we said has to be...
That they live there at night. They live there at night. Doesn't mean that it has to be open at night. That they're there at night also. That it's a permanent residence.
Homeless people live there, it's considered to be...
That's matter a lot of other things. If you have a child, if homeless people live in... That makes everything Rishus Yachid. Ich weiß nicht, danke, Shaila. The whole California's a Rishus Yachid then. Every underpass is a Rishus Yachid. Every park is a Rishus Yachid.
Does it affect work? Have homeless people sleeping in a park?
For them?
But why should it only be for them? If you're coming to their house,
129 people live in Central Park. 129 people live in Central Park.
Each one of them has a sosayim. That park is massive. Now, there's another one point I wanted to mention before I finish, if I remember where it is. If there's another tshuva from the Shalat Day, a tshuva lamet ches, the short ones, it starts on page 179 in your book. On page 180, the second paragraph, Tamua be'einai mashakosav b'shem Rav Echad. Yeah, there's one who was Mekel. Le'inyan heter azroim, regarding Zroim. The one who wanted to be Mekel, the mazroim heima shel nochrim. If the goyim are the ones that own the Zroim, ein adam oiser dover she'eino shaloi. The fact is that being that the guy is the one that planted it, the guy has no right, no koyach to be oiser it, and he calls it dvarim b'telim heim.
What's dvarim b'telim?
It's dvarim b'telim to say that the zroim of a guy are not mevatel the mechitza. Only zroim of a yid. Why? He says the reason why zroim are mevatel, we all know it, because ein derech adam loder b'mokim zroim, and therefore it's not about who did it. It's not about the person that did it. It's not about whether the person who planted the Zroim had it with the intention of annulling the Rishus HaYachid. It's that by the mere fact that you have a Rishus HaYachid, which now has Zroim covering a chunk of it, that area where the Zroim are becomes Ois Rishus HaYachid, turns into a Carmelis because its status changed. Just the Metzius. The Metzius changed from one status to another status. So, that was wanted to point out to you. It's important when you do it. It's not only about closing off, finding how to make all the walls around the city. It's also about finding out what's inside the city and making sure that inside the city you don't have areas which are closed off and are not made for people to walk around in them, and their fields or whatever it is, and they don't have a mechitzah around it. You will have to make a mechitzah around it to be able to carry, because otherwise everything around it is parted specifically to that area. And with that we will conclude.